Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Aziza Robinson-Goodnight. I'll tell you a little bit about my story and my background and how I guess I was asked to present. I'm excited. So I am the daughter of Paul Goodnight. I grew up in the piano factory. The piano factory was historically a catalyst for artist housing around the world. Artists from around the world would come to that space, live, spend 30% of their income, whether they made nothing or something. It was a totally amazing, this is my story, it was totally amazing, active space. There was childcare, there was gardens, there's a courtyard, there's a gallery, there's a dance studio, there's everything we needed as artists. And it was like growing up in an art dorm. My family is also the last of the Mohegans of the artists in that building now. And so I've come to a point where being immersed in that life, you feel and see something different. But as I've become over the last 10 years, really an advocate, I've got to take myself out of the picture, understand the capitalism around the arts and art spaces and art people. And I've come with a few solutions.
All right. Drop some knowledge.
From experience, too.
From experience. I might not look old enough for experience, but I am 36 years into this world. So creative space is the economic power of holding space or occupying space. The basics for, so I come from a lens of not just an artist, but from the Black arts world. The Black arts world is a group that receives the crumbs of the revenue or capital that comes in through the arts. So the basics, I start with the basics. When I came to my learning and understanding and research around the arts, one of my mentors just was like, just look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The one thing that Black people are at is we're at the absolute bottom of our needs. Black people, Black artists, these are the basics. So in thinking about breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis, yes, we are at the bottom of receiving our needs. For me, creative space starts within. So if you cannot, if you don't have that peace of mind and stability within, it's hard for you to create outwardly. So the basics are the most essential part of creative space to me. The facts. This is in 2018, the direct economic impact, and these statistics are actually coming from the Arts Impact Report. Are you guys familiar with the Arts Impact Report?
No.
So Arts Factor. Arts Boston came out with a report first in 2014 and then in 2019. It was about the impact of the arts in Boston. So they came out with this large report telling us that the impact from the greater Boston arts culture was $2 billion. There was 30,000 plus jobs were created by the arts sector and 21 million at arts events. That's over 4 times, that's over 4 times the amount of all major Boston sports teams. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
More than the sports team?
More than the sports teams. But
Visual and performing arts.
all for the arts. But the Black arts world is seeing none of this. So that is a major impact or effect in creating space for the communities of color. So when I say Black, I mean the embodiment of all color. The plight of one Black person is the plight of all people. We have fought for everything and built most things in this world. So these are just the facts. This is all coming from artsboston.org in their 2019 report. And these were the new stats for 2018. The wealth gap. if you look at the wealth gap, another fact that the wealth gap in the city, these numbers are coming from the Federal Reserve report, the color of wealth. There is what, $247,000 of net worth for white individuals and $8 for net worth for blacks. That is a major impact in ownership, which impacts creative space for people of color. Examples. I also want to talk about some wonderful examples of creative spaces that are here in the city. And they vary in different kinds of ways. The Piano Factory, of course, I talked about the Piano Factory first, originally was an amazing space for artists to live and thrive. Ink Block, I talk about Ink Block as well because that's where I live now. But it also provides space. It's not as accessible as far as price, but it also provides a space for artists to come together and create change, to show their work. Midway Studios, a 4-Point channel, they're a great example of artists owning their space. It's a little inclusive, but it is wonderfully managed as far as ownership for artists. The Strand Theater is a creative space where lots of things happen. It has been an asset to the community for a long time for theater or performing artists. Inner Sanctum is a small space where artists gather. The Fairmont Innovation Lab. The Fairmont Innovation Lab came out of the Fairmont Cultural Quarter Initiative and is from the brain power of lots of artists and arts organizations working together. Black Market is wonderful e-commerce space for creative individuals. All the local galleries, there's amazing local galleries. There's some downtown, there's some, and there's wonderful galleries. Galleries lend to people coming together. I feel like art is something that people can feel good about, even though it's compelling, even though there's so much, but galleries are spaces where artists can come together and organize. Galleries as anchor tenants are always good. Market is a co-op space in Dorchester. The new Revex Labs is going to be a wonderful art space for our communities. It's banks doing a different thing to do things for communities with their funding. The People's Academy is also a wonderful space where artists can create and learn trades. And then the community centers. The community centers lend a lot for our children. So Beantown Society has been around for a long time, done a lot of organizing, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the YMCAs. There's a lot of creative spaces in the city. Again, creative space for me comes internally. So activation and occupying space also are included in creative space in my head. So those are just the broad examples of what I mean when I talk about creative space. So let's talk a little bit about the history, or what I see as where we are at or where we've come to around creative thinking and actually being able to create space. In ancient Egypt, their art was everywhere. Sorry. The origin of style art was first, and it was based on the perfect balance. So in ancient Egypt, their art was more focused on perfect balance, the ideal world, and the gods. So they seen it as a necessary tool for afterlife as well, which gave it greater value. And then globally, the Enlightenment era lent to the present, the intellectual movement emphasizing reason, individualism, and skepticism. So the Enlightenment era art was not like a side tool, it was a necessary tool to use as common sense. So the arts was used as a common sense tool, and it was a great, and obviously it worked in that time. And then actually the hippie era. The hippie era was a time where people were rebelling against the system and were allowing themselves to think freely and openly. I think that was a great time for the creative era as well. And then now presently, the creative boom. So as the recession was happening, the creative boom was also happening. So as our economics were going down, the creative boom was going up, which because people were being forced to think differently. Corporate America had to bring in more artists to think more broadly, and they had to create space for artists. Also, individuals were not working as much, so it created more entrepreneurs, and more of the free thinking individuals were forced to actually use their creativity instead of being boxed in, because America had been very programmed to be corporate and you have to do life this way. So when I talk about creative space, we have to think about where we are as people and thinking as well as space, because creative space for a long time was just a museum or this thing we do, but not part of our life. It wasn't seen as a tool, it was seen as a nicety, not a necessity. Struggles. So part of the major struggles for communities of color when it comes to holding space around the arts is, one, the wealth gap. We just looked at the facts. The wealth gap leads to lots of things. How can you own a home when you're worried about eating? How can you own a home when Black artists are literally receiving, or how can you own land or hold space or even have that much of a say with a wealth gap at that, the way the world is going now? Money is a wonderful tool. We've also been used as a gentrifying tool. The artists are used primarily to gentrify a neighborhood. It is something that is learned in what is it called? Planning. What is that called? Urban planning classes. They say, bring in the artists, have them do some funky thing for free, and the artists will stay, and they'll stay around, and they'll continue to do things because we're so nice. We're so nice. But you bring in the artists, which brings in the culture. So that's us occupying, holding space. So you think about the piano factory. Before there was an owner to the building, the artists were living and cohabitating in that building with other creatives like plumbers and mechanics. They lived in that building as well, and they were rigging their own systems, and they were the perfect example of cooperative economics. No money exchange. Then there was a developer who saw that, came in, got the building for $50,000 in partnership with the city, because it was being nice. Redid all of the building, had a clause, tried to sue the tenants that actually built the culture, was there before him, lost, and then in my lifetime has fully gentrified out a culture. So the gentrifying tool happens too quickly to artists and doesn't allow us to hold space. The academic disadvantages. There is a major academic disadvantage. So, when I talk about artists of color, we only occupy 20% of the people that are actually going to school for the art world. We are not pushed to go to school for the arts. We are not encouraged to go to school for the arts. We are usually swayed away from it. Only 8% are Black. So the economic disadvantage has allowed people to come into our neighborhoods, into our spaces, and take ownership because they have a degree in art. The glass ceiling. We see the glass ceiling every day. We've seen it happen to Counselor not counselor. Oh my God, Congresswoman Presley, just on Monday. The glass ceiling is something that has to be shattered. It has to be shattered, and for us to hold space, like emotionally, physically, all of that, that has to be shattered, especially in the art world, especially in the city where we're bringing in as a whole 4 times the amount of money than sports in a sports town. And the nice but not necessary. Arts is seen as nice but not necessary, so it should be included in all development projects, in my eyes. But it is a struggle. And the generation income for others, we generate income for so many other entities while getting left behind. Sorry, I didn't finish that. But that is the major thing that is a major struggle for the art world. We are so nice, we do all these things, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary to be in schools in neighborhoods of color. It's not necessary for us to be included in decision making. It's not necessary for us to be included in holding space. And those are the struggles. So in honor of Dr. King, this is a quote that the Very Black Project posted this morning that I thought was appropriate. Whenever the government provides opportunities and privileges for white people and rich people, they call it subsidies. When they do it for Negro or poor people, they call it welfare. The fact is that everybody in this country lives on welfare. Suburbia was built with federally subsidized credit, and highways that take our white brothers to the suburbs were built with federally subsidized money to the tune of 90%. Everybody on welfare is on welfare in this country. The problem is that we all too often have socialism for the rich and rugged free enterprise capitalism for the poor. That's the problem. That is the problem in the arts community as well. Subsidies or what we deserve is not given. Black artists cannot have been struggling a lot with like financially, and welfare is not a positive word. It's used as a handout word, and it's something that we want to feel proud about our spaces and places and ourselves. So when I go back to Maslow's, like the needs of all artists are the same of needs of, or needs of Black artists are the same needs of all artists. So the Black arts community is just literally seeing the crumbs of everything. And the vision for the future. So it's something I'm calling the Mansa Musa effect. For those who don't know who Mansa Musa was the first African ruler to be widely known throughout Europe and the Middle East. And he's regarded as the richest person who has ever lived. He was so rich and generous that his handouts wrecked an entire country's economy. So that's what I see as the vision for the future. Financial liberation and cooperative economics. So co-op spaces for artists with home ownership ownership options or some sort of ownership options or stake in the ownership of the space or land. Rent to own options. Ownership is key. We need to own. Land is power. A person with one house could move more mountains than 50 renters. So that is key. So imagine if there was spaces where we own and we could say that. It makes a difference in politics. It makes a difference in how you connect to your neighbors. It makes a difference in how you feel. Federal support, subsidies, reparations. There's also this booming marijuana economy. Reparations for the art communities that help us hold on to space. So similar to what the federal government did in the 60s with giving white farmers land for free and grants to live on that land, and also and also a lot of them didn't even know how to farm. They also gave them lessons to farm. That gave them a whole leg up on the economically. And so I see Ujima project organizing to leverage and support the creative economy in that way, so that we as our community holding space create the Musa effect on the local economy. This is just my vision for the future. I would love to engage everybody else. If there are other facts and other things that individuals want to contribute to this, I would love to hear it. But this is just my journey through it. As a child of the arts community and who has directly experienced space being lost from a famous father, which is kind of like somebody who's contributed a lot to the community worldwide, it's kind of disturbing. So I just want to see it happen the opposite way, in a major way, for all of us.
Thank you for your testimony, Aziza. So we are the Boston Ujima Project. So what are the questions that are coming up so we can vision? What are the things that you think are needed to be able to support the work of artists, particularly holding and organizing space?
Thinking about how the Boston Ujima Project can actually, for artists, like thinking how, like if it's a creative loan for ownership, if it's, like grants that are leveraged through the federal government, through Ujima Project and the organizing efforts of Ujima Project, because sometimes, money talks to money. So Ujima Project has done a great job in, raising funds and being able to do these things. It sometimes needs that push to have other entities actually do the work.
Right, to hold them accountable.
Hold them accountable.
So in order to get to that place to leverage that kind of accountability, at least for the artist space, what are some concrete examples of situations in your organizing life where you, like you were saying, there's a lot of leeching of power. So how you've been seeing it eroded, but then what is the resistance to be able to overcome them? Is there an example of a story like that, and what are the kinds of numbers that would have made you be able to hold the power? Like what type of organizing allowed you to hold that power?
I can talk about the Residents of the Piano Factory.
Okay.
In the 90s, that was the first time that the owner of the building tried to sue the tenants and take the land. So that probably was like 200 people. And we just stood outside of the building in force with signs. And I'm sure there are other people outside that live there to just stop it. So that, and also just the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Mm-hmm. And just being very vocal about the disadvantage of what's happening every single day.
What was that year? Like those years that was happening?
I don't, 90, maybe 97.
Okay. So for almost like 20, 25 years ago, you were facing it in a well-established arts space. And the artists were organizing together to hold on to it.
Yes. They held on to it. So
yeah, they held on to it.
I think that was the first time tenants had fought against the landlord and won. Mm-hmm. For that kind of space. Mm-hmm. And so the landlord had put a clause or had wrote a new contract that ended in 2014. Of course, he had already pushed out most of or they had died, so there wasn't that many numbers anymore. So things shifted.
Did the artists organize by themselves and they were holding this on their own? So there were no other organizations that they were, okay. Because also City Life obviously does that kind of work, but maybe there could be better links with, although the artist communities have really disappeared in the
They have, and
yeah.
that's something that has to, there's a lot of fragmented stuff going on in the art community, but that's because we don't hold real space and ownership as a community. But I think that's what needs to happen again, like space that is not just, here you go, you can do this for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna just make millions of dollars after that. Like some more of a, so like in Rhode Island has a very vibrant arts community that has held space since the 70s. And has expanded. I think it's called 18, I can't remember the name right now, but there was a small group of artists, they held space and they expanded within the neighborhood, and it's still a vibrant art community held by the artists. There's not, it's in Providence, you know what I'm talking about.
Dirt Palace?
Yeah, no.
Or
Well,
is
it's
There's
a
so many.
couple of blocks.
Yeah, but it was one building. The artists manage it. There's artist housing. There's galleries. There's boutiques. There's education. There's it's like a village. But it started in the 70s and expanded. But it's in Providence.
Sky.
Yeah, there's one of the biggest budget co-ops is an arts space in New Mexico. Do you know about that?
I don't, but New Mexico has a vibrant art community.
So I was going to ask you what you thought of it, but
I don't know, but what's the name of it? I
can't remember the name of it. It's like, but they've got like huge budget and huge paid staff. Oh, Meow Wolf.
What's it called?
Meow Wolf.
Meow Wolf?
Meow. Yeah, it's an interactive museum. Yeah, it's a really cool space. George Lucas is actually on the board of directors. No, sorry, not George Lucas. What's the Game of Thrones kid?
Not the right crowd.
And they're like expanding them. They're like opening one in Las Vegas. And it's like there's like 300 artists.
That's awesome.
Pull together to create this like museum experience, storytelling.
And I would love to see how many artists of color are really involved.
In the documentary,
But I know that
they did, portray that it was very multicultural. But
I'd like to see.
But there is a union. It's like there's a lawsuit where the collective they unionized, or there was a lawsuit for gender-based discrimination issues. But I don't know.
What do you think about the idea of public? There is a movement now to have public land for public good instead of selling it to developers and land trusts. Like when I talked about the rent control thing, all that's in on it too. It was right to the city life's part of it. And the inclusionary fund, there's some groups that want to give some money to the arts too out of that for the developers. Because I know they used to have it when I was in country. Land rich and poor, because if you have your land, they say even in Brazil sometimes they had the land, but when they took it away they had to beg. Because if you have your land and nothing else, you can grow your own food.
You can live, you can sleep, you can cooperative economics, exactly what they did the Black arts community used to literally live off of each other. Like that's the community I remember, like everything they did was about each other. Like if it was at the National Center for African American Artists, if it was at AMARC, they all really relied on each other. If it was at Page Academy, like these are the things that stem from that community. It's just that racism is real. And sometimes people see brown and don't see right.
What do you think, how is the atmosphere it seems like 20, 30 years ago when Black artists could support each other and show up together to hold that power versus what has been happening and how has it changed now?
It was powerful. It was very powerful. It allowed me, my bubble was burst when I was 25. I didn't even really experience. So when I talk about holding space within self, because the Black art community was so strong and they hugged the children and everything, we knew that we were wonderful, which allowed us to really get things done, really love to learn. And they helped each other or helped us at the same time. So I could run around at any event and I know that there are probably like 20 moms, like they see me, and my parents do that as well. But as capitalism came into the fold, the Black arts movement was super big in the 90s. So a lot of different artists were making a lot of money. Things got a little fragmented. People could be bought out. But that's because as a whole, as a community, you have to do what you have to do. If you have to feed your children, if you have to, put a roof over your head, you have to do crabs in a barrel. You have to do what you have to do. But it's a force. It's a social mechanism that has been done to every field. But you feel that the arts we should not be moving in that way.
Yeah.
But people have to eat. We do live in America.
Yeah.
People have to have a roof over their head. So it's shifted into, now graffiti is like a capitalistic movement that people will show street art and have no Black people there.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to me when Black artists were getting arrested for this, for the form of expression, because they had no other place to do it. So
can I jump in to add to what she's saying from experience? Because, like, for instance, she touched on People's Academy. For me, myself, my chief advisor is Judge Leslie Harris. And I'm funding this program for over 15 years out of pocket. What I do is I left the union after buying a triple decker. My third floor is the academy, whereas I pay inner city residents to pay them to learn a trade and place them, and never got any public support. And we went around the city and they wouldn't even sell us a building or land. So I took my house and turned it into the academy. But now with this new mayor, he finally agreed to sell us a plot of land so we could expand and do like what she's saying, to supply trades, art, entrepreneurship, different things like that. But the thing, Massachusetts and Boston in particular is so wealthy, and I had to go into my own pocket to this day.
Yep.
And pay individuals that's on the streets, that's wreaking havoc, and I'm paying them and teaching them.
Yeah.
Think about that. And they refuse to sell me a property.
They should have given it to you.
Refuse
exactly.
to sell it.
And
I bought my first house when I was 22 or 23 years old, and they refused to sell me so I could expand this training component. Think about that.
it's those who control the image control the mind.
Right.
So the image of us is not seen as a wonderful, beautiful. After the crack era, our image went down, and that's not something we impose on ourselves. So that, and then like, there's something I was gonna say when you were talking. It's just it's a matter of the value that's seen in us. So T. Michael Thomas talks about he couldn't get a plot of land, but he's coming out his pocket. The developer for the piano factory actually was buying a new building in Western Mass for artists after doing this to artists in Boston. And the newspaper article said he did such a wonderful job for the artists in Boston. That's why he got the bid.
Oh,
But that's wealth. That's white wealth.
To purchase it and to develop it.
but the artist
Our
did it
tax
first.
dollars.
Exactly. And
Think
he
about
just
it.
got a new building,
Think
like
about
2
it.
years ago.
So the purpose of Ujima is to create a fund that is basically pooled from the neighborhoods that oftentimes, have very little support. In fact, a lot of violence from the state and the city. So let's say you said you did that thing, you had a program. At that moment, what would the number have been for you to have been able to purchase despite the resistance? Obviously, it's always about numbers, right?
Well,
Or do you think it was like a policy that was in place?
no, it was racism.
Okay.
I was seeing when Emperor Menino was in office,
Mm-hmm.
he was giving away buildings and giving funding. I was a kid.
Right.
But giving developers buildings and money to develop and rent to individuals with our tax dollars.
Well, just like white
And
farmers in the
would, right,
60s.
and would not sell me a property that I could train in the city kids, getting them off the streets to save the taxpayers money. They wouldn't even sell me the building.
Right.
And I was qualified. I went to Rhode Island on the east side, which is a Jewish neighborhood. And I bought a house for like 400 and something thousand. And they were like, whoa. But they would sell it to me there, but not in Boston. Think about it.
Right.
To train individuals, making them employable. They would not even sell it to me.
But the people who are selling it to are the ones that are displacing people.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk about subsidized rent, but that's really subsidizing the landlords.
It's subsidy, but it's
I know,
subsidized.
I meant that.
It's
no.
still old school market rent.
Yeah, because people need it. People need it because the developers are charging so much.
So basically, moving for the future, if the idea of having people's power monetarily as well to leverage the areas that are officially resisting, development by community, for example, in your space, you're also saying that whatever artist spaces we create, artists need to be organizing with each other as well. And somehow you're saying that capacity has also been eroded. People are doing it, but it's like...
It's so fragmented,
Yeah.
it's siloed, but it's effect that has been put on our neighborhoods. Like, you think about how many nonprofits are in our neighborhoods.
Mhm.
That's how we're used to functioning.
Mhm.
There's not a million nonprofits in the suburbs.
Yeah.
There's probably one in one neighborhood, another in another neighborhood, but usually no. It's like, not only should the fund actually like create a space, but also like, how do we come back together?
Mhm.
How do we create ownership options for one boss? Like, but how do we make sure that everybody actually has equal opportunities to speak on it as well?
All right.
Oh, yeah, I'll take
Yes,
that.
Fiona. Or Becky.
Oh, sorry.
My question's kind of related to what you're saying about One Boston, because I was thinking when you were speaking about how Boston in many ways feels like, it's hard due to the legacy of redlining, like a patchwork of neighborhoods. And I'm just thinking about now, like how we have a lot of neighborhood-based arts programming. Like I think about how you have Roslindale Open Studios one weekend, JP Open Studios the next, and then Roxbury Open Studios. And I'm thinking about what you think about just like neighborhood culture within Boston. And I don't know, like also the legacy of redlining and kind of leaving spaces and places kind of geographically disconnected from each other.
The open studios, I think, are good to be like they are, because it allows different people to go to those neighborhoods and experience the arts. It's just that, ask the second part of that question again.
Oh, I'm just thinking about how, like, there's one, it's kind of this double-edged sword where, like, neighborhood pride is really cool. Bringing people out to those spaces is great. But then by the same token, sometimes it feels like they're segregated. It's segregated. And also, I think due to the legacy of redlining, there's a lot of places in Boston that are geographically or transportationally disconnected from others. So for example, it's easy for us to all get to, say, JP Open Studios. but what about Hyde Park Open Studios?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think that the city should play more of a role in being active around making sure people get to the neighborhoods, but that's like everything. When we think about how much the arts bring in, where's that money coming in, and what do people see when it comes to tourist attractions in the city? So on the tourist website, you might see the duck tours or whatever's happening in the commons, or like that brings value to those neighborhoods. It's not, you're not like talking about Hyde Park, you're not talking about Dorchester. Now everyone's talking about Roxbury, but forever Roxbury was blight and horrible and scary to other people, not to us. So it's literally those who control the image control the mind. So if the city puts emphasis on the beauty of all the cultures that exist, then we'd all have a better time, an easier time making the income or creating space of our own, and maybe even healing around our division. But like City Hall is divided.
Yeah.
So
there's like such a tension between needing that kind of attention from a city level, but also knowing that it's also all of a sudden that kind of attention means that they could be gentrifying us. They are definitely gentrifying us.
Part of what she's saying is, and it's very important, is the opportunity to be an owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is what's going to break the mold, period.
Mm-hmm.
People have to be allowed the same inclusiveness, the same equal opportunity. Because what I've accomplished, not as much as that dad did, but I've done some things that has never been done. I don't think a lot of folks cannot catch it. They would not be able to catch it with my creative skills. There's a whole lot of, it's too much to get into. But I should at least have that right.
Right.
To be given that opportunity like any other person. If I want to buy something to better myself and others, I should have that right to be allowed to do so.
Yeah.
Not be judged by just because of the color of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this, I made this and many more.
Oh. Yeah.
See that? Right? And many more. Look at the front of the State House. Those copper balusters and stuff, I did it.
Oh.
Clock Tower, Faneuil Hall, Gardner Museum, Old Science Church, where the marathon stuff. I could go on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Over 50 buildings in Boston, historic buildings.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not good enough to purchase land to build. But hopefully, like I said, Quincy and Warren Street, this is the big test for this city. Will they sell us that land?
Mm-hmm.
And if they do, then these artists and individuals will have a chance. Finally, after all these years. Let's see what happens.
again,
Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Maybe they should give it to you.
Yeah, I would rather pay for it.
Yeah.
So in that way, they can take it back.
Yeah.
I'll pay for it.
Well, is there any outstanding questions or thoughts?
We were trying to pass the ball to Hendrik.
Okay, I'll go quickly. In the interest of just thinking about what Ujima can do to help, obviously, we have an investment fund, so we can talk about investing in properties and things like that. But I was also thinking, we have a lot of investors as well, and I'm curious what percent of that $2 billion comes from donations, and if do we have access to investors who are giving to art institutions that are not supporting Black artists?
The
and if we
MFA.
could, yeah, for instance, if we could also, if we could gracefully organize as investor organizing
Yeah,
team member.
it has to be organized.
Organize those investors to think more carefully about their donations as well. So yeah, I'm just trying to think of multiple ways that we could come at this issue apart from just investing.
I think those things are great. I think that organizing needs to be had. I don't think that people of color need to be on the forefront of any organizing anymore. We're tired. I think that people need to fight for us solely with our feet up. It is what it is. We fought for lots of people
that live and breathe and activate space. But also leveraging like the fun, like leveraging, like I said, money talks to money. So using that space to leverage other investors that love, a lot of people love the arts, but they'll give back to an institution that's financially endowed, that doesn't need help, that is racially complicit.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like, what percentage of that 2 billion comes from donations versus government assistance versus like
What
sales?
2 billion?
The 2 billion in revenue.
That's people actually going to arts and culture. Like
That's just sales.
yeah,
Ticket sales.
Yeah.
that's just sales. That's not like grants, and that's literally just attendees.
Gotcha.
That's how much revenue is coming in. But the focus is on downtown.
Right.
You know, like if there's so many people that think that people of color don't even live in Boston from outside of the city, it's insane. And we're 54% of the population. It's in Black people are 24, and people think there's no Black people in Boston. So it's literally those who control the image control the mind. It's the narrative that's being told about the neighborhoods and the arts. Like that 2 billion is literally from patronage. So it's a lot.
So you all want to ask last 2 questions?
I am curious, so we can help support investing in the arts. We can support your Ujima or other organizations. But are there any other ways that we, like as a collective, not just those here, but other people, can help support the arts? Like what are the other things? It's such a big issue that it's not just funding.
Yeah, so it of course is advocacy. You go to a advocacy campaign for the arts world and you don't send many people of color, you don't, so that there's no voice. There's a small voice, but advocacy is a big thing. Also, like contributing to a fund individually, like individual donations on a regular basis where it goes into making sure that the arts, and arts space and arts ownership is thriving. That's going to make a difference as well. But just like advocating and advocacy is the biggest thing, because we all need to be supported and uplifted so that we can do what we need to do.
Okay, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Aziza. We're going, yeah. Oh, you have one more question? Okay. One more, this last comment.
I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. So the biggest festival in Boston at large is Carnival. And I'm curious about your thoughts on Carnival and Black person support that the city does for
100%.
Carnival.
What'd you say?
And what
Carnival.
we can do to put pressure on them to talk about it more, because it's the biggest festival. You go to other cities like Toronto, London, and it's, you go out there, you go to the airport and they're talking about Carnival. Like, what can we do to support that more, or like get the city to support it more?
Like I said before, those who control the image can control the odds. Ours was bigger. It's been shrunk down. There's more police presence.
Yeah.
We're seen as this horrible thing when it's a
control.
celebration. Yes, there's been shootings. In the 90s, when everybody was having shootings, when things were bad, like, yes, but like, that's what it is. We need to be downtown with the Caribbean Association. The leadership has, it is something that's not shown through our tourism. It's like when I talk about the fact that all these other things, like statues of colonizers are in tourism, like that's not okay. And we have to speak up for that. Like, we're going to get a sculpture of Frederick Douglass on the corner of Hammond and Tremont in the next year. Like, those sort of, Carnival is the biggest, and it is wonderful, it is beautiful, it's like amazing, and it's so fun. Like, I volunteer for Carnival in my friend's store in Blue Hill Ave, and I'm out there for Juve, and early in the morning, I take a nap and I come back. I think it's amazing. The energy alone, the food you can get. Like, it's just, we need to push our city and state to actually advocate for our neighborhoods and the arts and culture of us. Like, there's no advocacy. No, does anybody even really know Boston has carnival outside of Bostonians?
I do.
In a bit like Toronto, nobody's coming to Boston like they'll go to Miami, Toronto, New York. Like, it wouldn't be part of a tour package to go to Boston Carnival. Like, that's what needs to happen. Like, it's literally the perception of who we are in our culture.
All right, thank you so much, Aziza.